Welcome back to the Here We Go podcast. I am Trent Ging. You know Colin Phillips. Today we have a special guest on today, Alan Saunders. Welcome in, Alan. Thank you for coming today.
Absolutely. What's up, guys?
Not much.
Not much.
So wanted to start out today by what I assume most of Steeler Nation is going to see as the biggest breaking news of the practice today. Alan, you've probably got a lot of insight on this, so I'm going to kick it to you first. Russell Wilson, calf tightness. Is this a concern?
Yeah, it's a concern because I kind of thought we had put that to bed, and I guess we haven't. I don't really know what to make of all this. He doesn't look like a guy that's injured. He doesn't act like a guy that's injured. I've never seen him on a training table. I've never seen him with a wrap around his leg. I've never seen him with they call it, a little gun that, is like a massage gun that you like into your muscle. I've never seen him with an ice pack. I've never seen him talk to a trainer. I've never seen him limp. He was doing calf raises today. Like, I don't know, he just doesn't look hurt, but this is clearly something that's been going on for quite a while. I don't really have any. I will be very, very surprised if he doesn't play in the game. I'll say that, but I don't know what to make of this apparently continual injury issue.
Yeah, I think for me, that's kind of the thing that's interesting is that, so obviously I listened to you a good bit. I watch the afternoon drive on the way, well, not watch, but I listen to the afternoon drive on the way home from work a lot of times. And, you've been one of the guys kind of pounding the drum of like, this thing's not a big deal. If they were to play today, Russ is likely playing, and you said that kind of all through preseason. So I just found it interesting that now that this kind of crops up again. Colin, when you saw this, what was your reaction to it?
I can't believe it keeps coming back. I mean, like we've said it. I mean, he missed the first little bit of camp because of it, but there was nothing of the sort that bothered him during the preseason at all. He played all 3 games. I don't understand.
And he practiced yesterday. They were in pads yesterday. So, not that the quarterback's getting hit in practice at all anyway, but you would think that if it was just like a day, like if they just wanted to give a vet guy a day, it would have been yesterday. It wouldn't have been today. So I don't know. It's very strange. I would still operate in the assumption he's going to play, but it's definitely strange.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've seen obviously Tomlin mentioned about him being comfortable with it with Justin if he has to go, but I just kind of question if this thing keeps popping up, is this going to be something similar to like what Pat Freiermuth dealt with last year, where he had extended time with a soft injury that we didn't expect to go quite as long as it did? Like, is it one of these things? Is Russ's age playing a factor? Like, could it be a combination of the two? I just don't know. It's kind of baffling to me a little bit that this, I understood keeping him out in preseason as much as they did, but then to turn around and now we're like a couple days away from a game and we're still dealing with it. So I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think it's anything like Pat. When Pat got hurt, it was obvious that he hurt it again. Like, left practice, he was in the training room. We didn't see him the rest of that day. I was standing next to Russ in the locker room today. Came out of the shower, he got his locker, he's walking around. He looks fine. It's like Pat hurt himself. This is, I don't know. I don't know what this is. I don't know if it's where he can't do certain things. There's some kind of limitation. I guess the real fear is that calf injuries turn into Achilles injuries. And I think that's probably the reason to be fearful of this. But I don't think, he does not look like a guy that would be hampered by it right now if he had to play. So, I guess that's probably the bigger thing to fear.
So,
our
go ahead.
I was just going to ask, from your experience, Alan, are calf injuries anything like hamstrings where they just kind of linger with you all season long, kind of like Pat, or kind of like what we fear is going to happen with Warren?
I don't think you should have that fear with Warren at all. I think he's fine. They can, Burrow clearly wasn't right at the beginning of last season. or coming off his injury. I think they can. The real thing that like it's not going to take a lot from Russell Wilson. Like Russell Wilson's like barely an average quarterback, healthy right now. It doesn't take a lot to make him like kind of borderline unplayable. Like he can't not be mobile like that. So I don't know. We'll see. I would not be super concerned based on what I saw today, but just the fact that it's still a thing is definitely at least a little bit concerning.
I'm glad you brought up the mobility, Alan, because that was actually where I was going to go with my next question. We've got some obvious concerns with the offensive line being so young. You're going to need some mobility back there. Is this now something that we take into consideration? Should he start? Because a big part of Russ's game through his career has been that mobility, and because of his height, he uses that to find windows to throw through. So, Colin, is that a concern for you now? Should we look at the lack of mobility as being an issue with this young offensive line?
Well, especially week one, yeah. I mean, I know Alan essentially just said like it'd be incredibly surprising if he didn't play. But I mean, at what point do we sit there and say, okay, it's Thursday, we play in 3.5 days? I mean, I just think, like you said, I mean, how many times and how many of his highlight reel plays, man, are we sitting there and watching him extend it or play out of structure, right? I mean, the fact that we don't know who's going to be at either offensive tackle for that matter, let alone at guard, I would say it's a little concerning for week one. I would say at what point do we kind of just bite the bullet and start Fields? Because he at least can move if the O-line breaks down, which it probably will, knowing who we're playing against and who we're playing with on the line.
I think it's pretty clear who's playing on the offensive line right now. I think it's Jones, Anderson, Frazier, Daniels. I'm sorry, Moore, Anderson, Frazier, Daniels, Jones. Like I can't see it lining up any other way right now. Unless somebody else gets hurt, or they've been losing them at a fairly rapid clip over the last couple weeks. So, and Darnell Washington popping up on the injury report today. I mean, you're already looking like. I mean, I felt like the one thing you could say about if Broderick Jones has to play and he's not really very healthy, like you could just put 80 next to him. Like that's like, would you rather have your right arm in a brace, but you get Darnell Washington to your right side? Yeah, I'd take that deal. Like, because he's basically like a whole nother tackle over there. Who needs a right arm? You can play offensive line with one arm if you have Darnell Washington over there. But now and that, I mean, DNP on a Thursday is not a good place to be in terms of eligibility for a game. I'm going to make any judgment until tomorrow, but I wouldn't be optimistic about him playing at this point. Now they have the depth at tight end, but there's nobody that's nearly as good a blocker that's going to really help the offensive line like Washington is.
Yeah. Let me throw this up here because this is an interesting question Corey brings up. And I'll throw this to you first, Alan, and then we'll get to you, Colin. So any chances of a bit of gamesmanship from Tomlin towards Raheem Morris?
No. There's a chance this is like Russ just doesn't really want to practice. Like that, there's a chance that's what it is. There's a chance that he's really hurt. And if there's gamesmanship, the gamesmanship is Russ is so hurt that he can't play, and the gamesmanship has been propping him up to this point, right? If there's gamesmanship, that's what it is. Is that Russ is Aaron Rodgers hurt, and they've been weekend at burning him through the preseason. If that's where the gamesmanship is, that's what it is. There's no way he's holding his starting quarterback out of a Thursday practice, which is probably the most the busiest work day of the week for the quarterback, just for to mess with Raheem Morris. No chance whatsoever.
Colin, what do you think about that question?
I'm with Alan. I don't see anything to that. I mean, it's no type of mind game or anything like that. Like Alan said, I mean, he's your starter, so I don't think there's really going to be any gamesmanship towards that.
Yeah, so I'm going to move away from Russ just a little bit here and just have you go through a little bit of the injuries that you see and which ones should we be concerned about right now? Because obviously the list was, I think, a little extensive for going into week one. Anything you see as a concern right now, Alan, or anything that maybe we should just be like, hey, we're good to go? Like Jalen, obviously, you seem pretty optimistic about.
Yeah, I think Jalen will be fine. Talked to him a little bit today. Said he's returning kicks. Like, he's not going to be returning kicks if he's not like pretty good to go, because you don't need him to do that. I mean, you could very easily take that off his plate if they were worried about his health. I think we should have very minimal to no expectations for Roman Wilson, even if he's dressed. I wouldn't expect him to do very much. Same thing with Troy Fautanu. He may dress, but I wouldn't expect him to do very much. Corey Trice looks fine. Isaac Seumalo, I see him walking around. Obviously, a pec does not keep you from walking around, but like, he's not walking around with his arm in a sling. I remember when I saw TJ a couple weeks after his pec injury, and he had a purple mark like about this. Oh, if you're listening, you can't see, but I'm spreading my hand as wide as I can across my shoulder. That's what his looked like, and Isaac looks fine. So I think it doesn't seem like it seems like that 4-week time frame that was reported seems pretty reasonable to me. It doesn't seem like it's something more than that.
Anything interesting about him being considered week to week and Tomlin didn't rule him out for week 2 yet?
No. He could have half a leg and Tomlin could say week to week. I mean, it doesn't really matter. Like,
okay.
I think they're going to put him on injured reserve. I'm a little surprised they haven't, but they may just not feel like they need the roster spot at the current moment. We'll see. It's a lot easier when you haven't used any of your practice squad call-ups yet. The crunch isn't happening right now. They could call Skoranek up this week. They can call, Glue up if they want an extra lineman. Like, they got lots of Thomas Grant. There's lots of options there. It'll be like in 4 weeks where they'll be like, oh no, we don't have any more practice squad call-ups. That they might be looking at that roster spot like, we could use that. But right now, I don't think it's a big deal.
Okay.
So do you think the Fautanu lack of confidence for Fautanu is more about injury or lack of reps?
Both. He doesn't look healthy to me. I mean, I know he's like playing, but I posted a video today of him pushing the sled and like following the rest of the offensive linemen. And I'd have never once watched a drill and thought Troy Fautanu was the worst of the team's offensive linemen. I thought that today. Like, so, I mean, it just doesn't look like he's, getting a lot of power and drive out of that knee yet. I think that's probably, like cleared to play and feeling and looking 100% are two very different things. And then there's a third step here, is that he's got to prove that he deserves to be on the field, which he had sort of yet to do when he was injured. I don't think that he had beaten Broderick Jones. And that was sort of the idea of the way they laid this out, was that they wanted Fautanu to beat Jones first and then move Broderick to left tackle. And they never got that far. So it's hard to beat out a guy in season. Honestly, it's going to be tough. This could be a thing where it's like Broderick last year, where we don't see him until the middle of the season now. But I don't think he's healthy right now. So, I mean, I would not play him this week.
You brought up Roman Wilson, and he's a name that I think a lot of Steelers fans are. I mean, you have to have a little frustration with, because of the lack of the movement in the wide receiver room. And he's a guy that I think the team seemed to be counting on a good bit, even as a rookie to some degree. So I threw a question at Smitty when he was on the show, and I'm going to throw this to you too. I'm not sure if you guys talked about this, but a lot of the conversation about him seems to be about him not being ready because of the fact he's had no reps at all. Pads weren't even on when he got hurt. Oh, first day of pads is when he got hurt.
It was about the third or fourth rep with pads. Yeah.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about comparing him to what they did with Joey Porter Jr. last year and bringing him in situational football where, hey, we're going to be throwing, it's a third and long. We need you to run this route, get open and get a first down. Do you see anything like that maybe with Roman to work him into the offense?
Not this week. I do think you could see that early in the season. But I think the difference between that and Joey Porter Jr. is that I think Roman is probably better suited to a slot role than an outside role anyway, like forever and ever. Like, that's just the player that he is. Mm-hmm. And so, like, right now, Calvin Austin's going to have that role. could we see, if Roman starts with a bit part and he does well and you kind of get the Joey trajectory, and could he take over that role from Calvin Austin and be the quote starting slot receiver, by when did Joey start? Week 7 last year, something like that. Yeah, I think that's probably reasonable. But I think that's going to be a pretty small role in this offense anyway. And I don't see Roman Wilson being much of an answer on the outside. Maybe ever, certainly not like right away. And so I like the problem with the Joey Porter comparison is that by the end of the season, Joey Porter was acting like a number 1 corner and following DK Metcalf and players of that ilk around the field. Like there's no comparison like that for me in the near future for Roman Wilson. Like he's not going to become their number 1 receiver this season. Like that's no chance of that. So I would say, I would have pretty measured expectations for him this year. And we'll see how things go. But I definitely think that he could have like the kind of role you're talking about. Probably not this week because he hasn't really done very much so far. But I would say maybe starting in week 2, something like that. Yeah.
Okay. A big part of this Atlanta game, I think, is going to be based around the trenches. So, Colin, what is your first take as around our offensive linemen? How comfortable are you with the offensive line that Alan just laid out of what he's expecting to be the starters going against that front from Atlanta? What do you think?
Dude, that's a college offensive line, man. I mean, you're looking at, let's see. Now you're looking at Judon, Grady Jarrett, David Onyemata, who is the number 18th ranked interior defensive lineman via your guys' favorite PFF, and Zach Harrison. I mean, I don't know, man. At this point, it's like, me and Trent have talked about this since May, right? June, whatever month it was. That like this line needs gelled immediately. We can have no setbacks, whether that be with Broderick, whether that be with Zach Frazier, which thank God he's finally got the starting role, and with Troy Fautanu. And then it doesn't help with Isaac Seumalo being hurt. It's like, we can't catch a break. We can't seem to get any of these guys to develop. I mean, it's taken Broderick Jones over a year now. It's like, at what point do we kind of question his ability to be an NFL player? If he can't beat out Dan Moore Jr., I think we got some serious questions to ask here. And then again with Fautanu, like it's just, when I'm not gonna lie, Alan, when you laid out that offensive line that you saw happening, I was grinding my teeth a little bit because I'm just like, dang. But yeah, I'm not very confident about it. They got a stud interior with Onyemata and Grady Jarrett, and then adding Matthew Judon was kind of the one thing I was confident with about our offense. Like, hey, Atlanta doesn't have much of an edge rusher. Well, now they do, and we have, an 8th grader and a 7th grader at offensive tackle. So here we go.
I wouldn't worry so much about Judon. I think the Steelers have pretty good pass protecting running backs. They can help the tackles. Washington's a big loss, but Pruitt's a pretty good blocker. Pat Freiermuth is actually a very good, maybe. He's an underappreciated pass blocker. I know you don't want him pass protecting very often, but if you ask him to chip, that is not the worst situation in the world. Like he struggles in run blocking because he doesn't get any drive, but if he can just line up and smack somebody, he does okay at that. I wouldn't worry too much about Judon. For me, it's Grady Jarrett against Anderson and Frazier. To me, like James Daniels is not like some wrecking ball, but he's going to hold his own. I don't worry about that. I assume that he's going to get on Yamada just by the way that Atlanta seems to like to line up. But Grady Jarrett against those two guys making their first NFL start could be tough. I mean, he's really athletic. He's really hard to handle. And I really like Zach Frazier. I think he's a good player. I think he's a good prospect. I think he's going to be turn out to be a really good draft pick. But like young offensive linemen stink. Even guys who turn out to be good, like young offensive linemen, just are not very good. And okay, James Daniels, feel pretty good about him. After that, like it's Dan Moore, who I feel like, I think he's been there and done that at least. Like Broderick Jones not being healthy is to me is really tough. I think, they don't have any depth left. It's really quite shocking what's happened to the depth of that offensive line. So, I mean, yeah, I think, look, Moore is not a perfect player, but I think he's a professional. He is, I will say this, when you watch Dan Moore, PFF doesn't like him because PFF grades in black and white, win or loss, which is stupid because if you lose fast to the inside as a left tackle, your quarterback has bits and pieces of him that need picked up off the turf at the end of that rep. You're like collecting parts of him that used to be attached that are now no longer attached and trying to Humpty Dumpty him back together. If you lose slowly, especially if you're facing an elite edge rusher, when your quarterback has that internal clock turned up a little bit to know, like, hey, Dan Moore is not going to hold off Myles Garrett very long. If you lose slowly, it's not that bad. And Dan is actually very good at that. He loses a lot of reps slowly. That's why, like, when you watch them play the Browns, Myles Garrett will have 1 sack and PFF will give Dan Moore like a 9 rating. And you're like, how does this add up? Well, because he loses every rep eventually, but he gives his quarterback maybe not an appropriate amount of time, but enough time to know it's coming. And I'm really worried that the young guys are not going to do that because young offensive linemen have a tendency to just screw up. They get their hands in the wrong place, their eyes in the wrong place, they're blocking the wrong guy, they're tripping over each other. And that's when you get free rushers. And if you have a 35-year-old quarterback with a bad calf, free rushers are not going to go very well for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
No, I think it's interesting because I've been as much of a Dan Moore critic as everybody, but I mean, I'm really worried about this line right now as a group, and I have said this on his behalf. Experience does matter, and right now in a game where you're going to have a tough front, I really thought the Atlanta game was going to be a perfect game to start the season off for this team, and then all of a sudden we have all these injuries across the offensive line. They add Matthew Judah onto the mix, and then they add Simmons on the back end, and you're like, okay, now Atlanta's got real serious, real fast. So, I mean, who do you have more confidence in the interior between Anderson and Frazier right now? Because you got a rookie and a guy who essentially is a rookie because he barely addressed it all last year.
I mean, I think Spencer Anderson probably had the best preseason of any Steelers offensive lineman compared to like what I was expecting for him. I thought it was very good, especially when he played at guard, not so much a tackle, but I thought his work at guard was actually very good. He's probably going to struggle in pass pro a little bit. Frazier, I think, to me, it's more about just the first game. And like, I know Anderson doesn't have a lot of experience, but he's got a whole year of NFL stadiums. He played on field goal. He got like a couple snaps last year. And like the center has so much more responsibility on him. Like he has to get everybody lined up. He can't, his screw up become 5-man screw ups. Spencer Anderson just is going to get beat once in a while. I would be the most concerned about a rookie center with other inexperienced players around him. I think he's really going to have to lean on James Daniels a lot, but he can only do so much. And so I think that's probably my big concern. Quarterback center exchange has not been clean. They can't turn the ball over. They just can't. I think this is a really hard game for the Steelers. I've said it since the schedule came out. It's probably gotten harder since then. I've had this kind of as a loss for 5 months now, or however long we've known this game was happening. But I think this is a really, really difficult first game. Like the Falcons had a good defense last year, and I think Raheem Morris is a heck of a lot better defensive coach than anyone they had on their staff last year. So I think this defense is going to be pretty good.
Colin,
I'm gonna piggyback off of him. I had this chalked up as a loss and stay 0. I mean, obviously we have the worst quarterback. I feel like that was clear to start, whether we kept Pickett or not. So we had the worst quarterback. They go out, they add Judon and Simmons. Simmons, let's be completely serious here. Nobody wanted him. There's obviously a reason for that, right? And then, I mean, this is really the biggest test, like I mentioned earlier, and obviously Alan mentioned, for obviously Frazier being a rookie and Anderson and Daniels, just the interior in general, because of how good their interior is. But, dude, I mean, this is the biggest test for George Pickens. our entire questioning this offseason was, can he separate? Can he have a larger route tree? Can he actually not be a diva when his QB sucks, right? It's going to be tough for him. AJ Terrell is no slouch. He is absolutely no slouch. I view him as a top 14, 15 defensive back in this league. With Jesse Bates being, I think, the third best safety in the league. Obviously, I'm going to put Fitzpatrick and Kyle Hamilton in front of him. But, I mean, I really do think this is a huge test for less of the trenches, more about the receiving core. I really do. So, especially George Pickens.
Just real quick about Moore, since we were talking about it, I looked it up. One game against Matt Judon, gave up 1 sack, one pass defense. I think you would take that this week.
What if Judon's on the right side going against Jones?
He hasn't been, I guess.
Okay.
He could, but he's been playing right. They flip between a 4-3 and 3-4 front, but it's right outside linebacker on their depth chart. So.
Gotcha.
Flip it, an interesting comment. Anderson having the best play of any lineman, a good thing.
Frazier had the best play. Let's all take a deep breath here.
I would feel a lot better about Frazier if he had won the job instead of Herbig getting hurt, because I felt like that was coming. I felt like we started to see him improve, like when you could really compare them. And then you kind of lose that comparison, right? And it's a lot harder to gauge. Like Herbig was like a very good measuring stick, right? Like you knew how good he was, and then you could watch Frazier come in the next rep, and you're like, oh, he's looking better. Like this guy's looking like he's closer to. And then you lose the measuring stick, and you're like, I don't know if he's still getting better or not anymore. Like, what? He's a lot better than Ryan McCollum, I guess. Like that's not telling us much. I think you'd feel better about Frazier if Herbig was still there and he was playing. I have zero concerns about James Daniels. I don't know. Why are people worrying about the preseason? This guy's been in the league for 7 years. Who cares what he does in the preseason? Look at the resume. I'm not worried about that at all. There's guys who will like go out there and be like, it's a preseason. I'm gonna try to play with only my left hand. Like what? They're working on stuff. There's zero pressure on James Daniels to look good in the preseason. I don't worry about that stuff at all.
So staying with the trenches, but maybe flipping to the other side of the ball, a part of our team, I think, is going to be a strong point is going to be the front seven of our defense, because I think, number one, locking Cam up is a big deal. I know people were upset at the contract. I think most of them were upset without understanding the contract. Colin, you and I have differed on that talking point quite a bit. We've gone back and forth on that a lot. I still think Cam Hayward can be a very good defensive lineman in this league, even at his age right now. You pair him up now with Keanu Benton, who looks like he's an emerging star. Then you bring in our edge rushers. You bring in another linebacker. We've revamped so much to allow Minka to play deep, first of all. But more importantly, I think that who are you going to double team across this front? So how do you think our pass rush specifically, but our front seven in general, shape up against this Atlanta front? What do you think, Alan?
I don't think there's an offense in the league that is going to feel good about facing the Steelers front seven. It's probably the best one in football. I don't know who you'd prefer to have. I mean, I guess Cleveland's pretty good. Like I just don't know. Like they're so in the thing that I think is really impressive has been the depth. Like DeMarvin Leal looks awesome this year. Peyton Wilson as a backup linebacker. Yeah, the Steelers went like 5 years without having a starting linebacker as good as Peyton Wilson. Now he's coming off the bench. Like that. Nick Herbig. I mean, if those guys are in your second tier, your second wave of front seven, like, can you imagine being like an offensive lineman? All right, and you're blocking Cam Hayward, who is just, even if he's not as explosive as he used to be, he's crafty, he's incredibly strong, he's impossible to move. And you're like, all right, finally getting a break. Cam's tapping out. And here comes like twitched up, pissed off DeMarvin Leal, like running up the edge against you. Like, I mean, to me, that's really, really difficult to do. You finally wear down TJ Watt because you get a little drive going and you bring in Nick Herbig instead, and now you have to deal with this insane speed and bend off the edge. Like, there's not very many defenses that can come at you in waves like that. I'm not sure the secondary has that kind of depth, but I like the first 5 guys, slot corners, probably still a pretty big question mark. But, man, if this defense is not a top 5 defense, I think they're either underperformed or they got very injured, because I don't see any other way.
How about you, Colin? What do you think?
Well, I mean, I agree with Alan completely. Like, we're stupid good and stupid deep in the front 7, but let's kind of take a step back here and understand like how really good Atlanta's offensive line is. Okay, I mean, you're putting Kirk in a pretty good spot here, with Jake Matthews on the left side and Caleb McGarry on the right side. You got a really, really elite tackle tandem there, which probably is top 4, top 5-ish in the league. Obviously, you got Philly and San Fran and probably Denver. Chris Lindstrom's the best interior offensive lineman, not named Creed Humphrey in football, in my opinion. And then Drew Dahlman is a really good center who really does a good job of taking command on that line, with the only weak spot being Matthew Bergeron. We're lucky enough as Steelers fans, that'll probably be the guy blocking Ogunjobi instead of Cam or Benton. So, I mean, they do have a really good offensive line there. And it's really just a matter of how quick can we get pressure and how often, because Kirk's been in the league a long time, man. He's still got it. So I don't know.
We haven't seen Kirk since that injury. I'm not sure how mobile he's going to be. I think that's a really unanswered
Has
question.
he ever needed mobility though?
Yeah. I mean, he doesn't need to run. He needs to be able to move in the pocket though. And like, if he can't, that's going to be tough. If you can't step up with the Steelers edge rushers, like even really good tackles have to give ground with the Steelers edge rushers. That you have to be able to step up and move around the pocket as a quarterback. And especially like when you look at the Steelers corner, like Joey's going to play press. Like it's what he's really good at. So like if you're a quarterback, you kind of know like, okay, the quick throw is not going to be there. I have to wait. And now like, okay, then the offensive line is going to give ground. I have to buy time. Like, the Steelers defense makes it so hard to beat them in the passing game. I think you can probably run against them still a little bit. Like they're willing to give up yardage. I think that is more like a sort of tactical decision than it is any critique of their individual players' abilities. I just think fundamentally the Steelers, like if you really want to hand the ball off and run like 3.5 yards a carry all game, like fine, go ahead. Like that's sort of their thing. But I just don't. I would not be feeling confident if I was Atlanta's offense, having not seen Kirk Cousins move, and this pass rush coming at him. I don't think that's a very good matchup.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. I get what Flip's trying to say with this, trying to say that
Yeah, I don't understand.
They really that often. I think he's referring to Kirk Cousins. Will he need to step up and be mobile with that offensive line in front of him? But for me,
probably not.
Listen, I think this defensive group, maybe I'm overshooting this a little bit, but I think this defensive group can not only be the best in the league, I think they can be elite. Like put up very similar numbers to what Cleveland did last year. And I think this group, with how deep they are with edge rushers and interior rushers, I think they can chase down that sack record. I don't think that's outside the realm of possibility. I mean, do either of you disagree with that?
I mean, I think the sacks are mostly dependent on leading games. So I think that's probably the area that I have a little concern with. Like you rack up sacks in games where you're up 2 touchdowns in the second quarter, and then a team has to spend, 45 minutes throwing the ball. I'm not sure I see a lot of those in the Steelers' future. So I don't know about the sack record, but like, I mean, I think this is a defense that should be trying to give up fewer than 300 points. And to me, that's an elite defense. And I think they're capable of that.
Yeah.
With the back half of that schedule too?
Yeah, I mean, I think the depth to me is one of the reason for the confidence there. Like, yeah, the back half of the schedule is going to hurt, but they can keep guys fresh. They can deal with a couple of minor injuries. Obviously, if TJ gets hurt, like they're probably not going to be as good. If Minka gets hurt, seriously, like talking about like guys who miss weeks at a time, they're not going to be as good. But I mean, they can handle a week here and there with the depth they've accumulated, I think. And I think that, especially like all of those sort of really key guys, like I feel pretty good about the defensive line depth. I feel extremely good about the edge rusher depth, even safety. Like I think Deshaun Elliott is a really good player. Man, I remember watching him around the league. I obviously played in Baltimore. You're pretty familiar with the guy. He is way better than I remembered. He is a really good player. And if KZ is your third safety, I think that's a pretty good situation. The depth of corner is probably questionable. I like Corey Trice a lot, but he has no experience. Beanie is, in a bad spot. But I just think this should be one of the best defenses in the league if it can stay healthy.
Yeah, I think you just answered Flip's next question. Confidence in the depth at quarterback. And then you just talked about like Trice and Beanie right there. So I think that for the most part addresses that.
Yeah, I don't think I'm super confident in the cornerback is probably the place that has the least depth on the defense. I really like Corey Trice. I think he will be a good player. Honestly, I think he's a future starter for this team. But like if Dante Jackson like pulls a groin tomorrow and is out for 4 weeks, like that's gonna be pretty tough to overcome with the depth they have right now.
You think he'll get a lot of snaps rotating in with Dante and Joey Porter Jr.?
I think he'll get the Joey. He will get the Joey last year.
Gotcha.
He'll play the dime, and then
situation stuff.
He'll play the dime, and then give him a couple more reps and see how it goes. Jackson's only on a 1-year deal, so they kind of need to figure out if they have something in Trice this year. They can't really afford to just let him be the backup. They need to find some ways to get him in there and see how he looks.
Yeah, I think people were like really down on Jackson. I've talked about this a couple of times too. Is I think they're putting him so much up against what we lost in Deontay Johnson and not looking at him as just being a true number 2 cornerback. And they're just so focused on that trade that I think he brings more value to the team with he's an experienced guy. So we're not relying on these young, inexperienced guys who, Trice obviously lost the year last year. Darius Rush has already kind of bounced around the league a couple of times before he's kind of found his way here. But I think Jackson gets a little bit of an unfair, I don't know if stigma is the right word, maybe, but like, how do you feel about that, Colin? Do you think like Jackson's a guy you're comfortable with as a number 2?
I mean, yeah, like look at what we've had the last decade, man. Like, is he better than Artie Burns? Yes. Is he better than Patrick Peterson? Yes. Or 34-year-old Patrick Peterson? Yes. Is he better than Levi Wallace? Yeah. I mean, and you even go back to some of those really bad teams in like the 17, 16, 15 ballpark, like Antoine Blake, Ross Cockrell.
Quarterback 1.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you're telling me he wouldn't have been a clear starter over Antoine Blake and Artie Burns? I think not. I mean, so yeah, I mean, I'm cool with him being the cornerback too.
On the team that year.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. Respect Mike Mitchell, man. I was a Mike Mitchell diehard, but come on. Mike Mitchell's so underrated.
That's the thing that he has. Jackson is super fast and
so fast.
Steelers are not a particularly fast secondary. Like Joey has good long speed, but he's big and like he's moving forward too much for his speed to play in the game. Like he's not going to be able to turn and run with someone because he's moving at them at the snap. Like if you let Joey bail, he could probably run with everybody, but like why would you let your 6'4", 210-pound cornerback bail? Like that's dumb. So like he's not going to run with guys, but Jackson can run with everybody. I'm really interested to see how they line up this week because like are they going to have Joey shadowing Drake London? Like, because I would. Yes, I think that's the way I would play it, but I think it's pretty interesting.
Well, and you said run with anybody. That's pretty good having a guy like Darnell Mooney on the opposite side. I mean, he's not really an all that great receiver, but he can run, Yeah,
so that's sub 4.4 guy coming out of college. So yeah, I think that's the way I'd line him up. But We'll see what they decide to do. Sometimes that's hard. It's awkward sometimes. Like if they're just going to line them up outside, it's easy. But like when they start to put them in bunches or start to put them on the same side of the field, I think you can get yourself into some weird places as a defense by trying to overdo that. But I would, like, in normal looking alignments, I absolutely would do that.
So let me ask you this: we're talking about Joey trailing and shadowing right now with Drake London. Kyle Pitts is another guy who showed up on the injury report. I'm not sure that anybody's concerned that he's going to miss this game.
Kyle Pitts himself said he's fine, so I'll take his word for it.
Non-issue.
Who are you putting on Kyle Pitts? Are you going to do by a committee type thing? Do you have a guy that we might lock up with him possibly?
25, man. Deshaun Elliott is the guy. Deshaun Elliott and Pat Freiermuth went at it all training camp, and I think like people are not talking enough about how good Pat Freiermuth is going to be in this offense because of how good of a job Deshaun Elliott did against him. Like those two guys, every time I saw those two guys, their face masks were touching basically all training camp. Elliott's really good, and I think that I don't know what other matchup you could possibly want for him. I mean, I think Atlanta will try to find a way to get him away from him, but yeah, absolutely, that's the matchup there for me.
Colin, what do you think?
I mean, that's scary, man. Well, I will preface for starters by saying for Flip, because I know he's watching, intently, to eat a lot of crow, because I said the same, that Deshaun Elliott's going to be a really good player, the perfect match for Minkah Fitzpatrick. But I don't know, Alan, man, that kind of scares me a little bit. I mean, Kyle Pitts, man, like you could say what you want about him. Arthur Smith's offense didn't include him, whatever. Say what you want. I think Pitts is a generational player, man. I'm still, to this day, year 4, on the Kyle Pitts train. I love him. I've kept him in fantasy all 4 years because I love him. Let's just say I'm definitely starting him this week. I just don't know about if Elliott can handle a player like that. Like, yeah, he can handle Muth, but you're really going to tell me that Muth is as good as Kyle Pitts, or like even relatively that close? I mean,
he's not the athlete, but Pitts can't catch. Like, that's the part that nobody talks about. It's a 57% career catch percentage. Like, most of the
Desmond Ritter tax. Desmond Ritter tax.
The Desmond Ritter tax is a part of it, but like Freiermuth has had Mitch Trubisky, Kenny Pickett, Mason Rudolph, and like dead arm Ben Roethlisberger. That's not a lot better than Desmond Ritter, and he
Still
doesn't
better.
have that kind of problem catching the football. And most of the Kyle Pitts problems to me are self-inflicted. I'm the idea that he's ever going to be a generational tight end, I think is absurd at this point. He's going to forever be a way better athlete than he is a player. I think that's what you got there.
How tall is Elliott?
6'1".
No, he's taller than that, isn't he? He's a big
6'1".
6'1". I don't know. He's huge. I think he's. I don't have a problem with that matchup at all. In fact, I feel like that's the matchup he was. I mean, no, the matchup he was signed to have is David Njoku. I mean, but that's right. Like the closest comparable thing. Like I just
is he.
I mean,
Terrell really
Edmonds did that role, and he was 3 inches shorter, right? No, maybe not. Maybe about the same height. I don't know. I feel like Elliott's
5'11".
I feel like Elliott is a significantly bigger player than Edmonds, but yeah, I think that's the matchup the Steelers want. I know that.
Yeah, I'm sure Atlanta's going to try to move him around and get Pitts into favorable matchups probably.
Yeah,
and
I mean, they're going to try to. What Atlanta wants is Landon Roberts on him. Like that's what they're looking at. I'm like, E-Rob's my dude, but that's a bad matchup for the Steelers. They should avoid that happening.
Yeah, so then I question to both of you. I mean, I have Pitts and Freiermuth on 2 of my teams. I mean, do I start Freiermuth then? Is that what you're telling me?
Oh, I don't know. I mean,
PPR?
Yeah, is it PPR?
Oh, yeah.
If you're PPR, I'm starting Muth all day because I think he's going to be such a focal part of our offense.
Yeah.
That's my opinion.
Yeah, I think you're probably looking at like 7 to 10 targets pretty easy, and he catches almost all of them. So, I mean, I feel like there's a very low floor or very high floor with Freiermuth. You're probably giving away a little bit of the ceiling, right? He's not going to break off like a 60-yard touchdown. But
I had to laugh at this one.
I think here's the way I would answer that question. If you think you're probably going to win, play Freiermuth. If you think you're probably going to lose, play Pitts, because then you need to hit the big touchdown, right? If you feel like your team is already ahead, just play Freiermuth. You'll be fine. You're going to get like 8 points, probably, for sure. Maybe 10. Pitts could have 0, but he could have 22.
So let me switch gears back to the offense again here real quick for a minute. The biggest concern on the offense outside of the line right now is probably who in the world is going to emerge out of this wide receiver room. Van Jefferson kind of took the wide receiver 2 role pretty early in camp, it felt like.
By default.
Nobody
else.
Who do you think has a decent game or a chance at a decent game right now going into Atlanta, not named George Pickens?
Pat Freiermuth. If you ask me for another one, I'm going to say Jaylen Warren. I wouldn't be putting a lot of hopes in the rest of the team's wide receivers. I don't think. I mean, Van looks the part. Like he just looked like physical specimen. He looks like you look at the guy, like he should be a pretty good wide receiver. There's not a lot of separation. Doesn't have like it's like perfectly average about ability in terms of like body control and contested catches. Like he kind of makes most of the ones he's supposed to, but there's nothing that stands out to me whatsoever about like the player in any above average way. Like he's pretty fast, I guess, but like it doesn't really show up. They can use him. He's pretty good. I'll say this: he's pretty good against zone. But like, who's going to play zone against him? Why would you feel like you need to do that? The thing about Van Jefferson I like is that he is a serious veteran, and I think he'll be a good mentor for George Pickens. And I honestly think like George Pickens going from a pretty good wide receiver to a star is the only place there is any upside in this wide receiver room. And if Van Jefferson can facilitate that, that will be better than anything any other receiver is going to do on the field.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, Flip and I were talking about this before the wide receiver thing was even figured out with Van Jefferson being the second. He thinks both running backs are going to have more receptions than anybody else at receiver that's not Pat Freiermuth or George Pickens. And
I would certainly think that Freiermuth and Warren are going to have any more receptions than any other receiver besides Pickens. And Harris certainly could. That's not crazy.
Yeah, more screen game this year maybe because of the young offensive line.
Please no.
They put in a ton of screens in training camp. I feel like they ran more screens than I even knew existed in training camp. I think it will be a very big part of this offense.
Yeah, it's interesting because I actually did not. I just had a feeling they were going to run a lot of screen just because we knew we were going to have a young offensive line, and the best way to slow down some pass rush is going to be through the screen game. And I saw actually Ramon Foster. I saw his show. He was talking one time about when they were all coming in together, kind of him and DeCastro and Pouncey and Gilbert when they were all real young together. That it was so much easier for those guys moving forward than backwards. So even in the screen game, it kind of gets those guys going forward in a pass protecting type of situation where I think it plays to the young guy advantage where they just want to go beat people up. So
screens, regular play action, RPOs, boots and waggles. I feel like that's
blood
like
concepts because they're easy.
Yeah. Any kind of mesh concept. I feel like that is all going to be heavy in this offense early, not because it's like these things Arthur Smith is dying to do, but because it's going to slow the pass rush down for the offensive line. Absolutely. I would be. And the other part of it is they have really good receiving running backs and they don't have good receivers. So like they don't have a real, like some teams want to get out there and establish downfield pass like that. It's not going to be these Steelers. They want they want teams moving forward, but they want them to do it cautiously and not pinning their ears back. All that kind of stuff is good. Najee Harris is very good at running draws. I think you'll probably see a lot of those. I just think it's going to be a lot of like off balance attempts. Like, and then, get them worried about two things short, right? It's like, oh, they're running I think they're going to be able to run the ball really well. Even with the offensive line banged up, I think they're going to be able to run the ball. Zach Frazier's a really good run blocking center. Broderick Jones, I think, should still be a good run blocker as long as he's like not just cripplingly injured. And I think Spencer Anderson can run block fine. He's not great, but he's fine. I still think they'll be able to run the ball. I'm not sure about the pass protection. So run, all those mixed direction stuff we talked about, and then 5 times a game, let Russ throw it as far as he can.
Yeah.
There's a ton of RPOs. There's a ton of RPOs in there.
Yeah, totally agree. So
you think the RPOs should be maybe for Fields?
If they Russ can run RPOs. Assuming his calf is like working. I mean, he can run. They didn't put all that stuff in there just to only use it for Fields. But I think you would see more of it. I mean, if Fields has to play, they will that will be the whole offense. Like there will be no medium. Like Russ can run like modern spread medium passing offense. Like he can do that. It's not really his forte. He's not very good between the hashes. Like it's mostly sort of Kenny Pickett style, everything to the outside. I think in Russ's case, it's just because he can't see over his own offensive line a lot of the time. But like he can do that. I'm not sure that Fields can really do that on a regular basis. I think if it's Fields, it's all that stuff. And then like quarterback power and like stuff like that, which you're not going to run with a 35-year-old Russell Wilson, but we've seen put in like those are in there. They're not in there for Russ and they're not in there for Kyle Allen. So you're going to see Justin Fields in this game, even if Russell Wilson's healthy. I'm 100% on that one.
Yeah. So I think you have to have packages for him. He's just the best athlete on the field of pretty much every game he's going to walk into. So
I honestly think like using him as just a runner is like kind of the best of both worlds, where like he's the best athlete they have. Like they should play him a wide receiver, probably better than most of their wide receivers at being a wide receiver. Like they got to find a way to use him somehow. But like I think running with Justin Fields is certainly on the table.
I'm going to kind of rapid fire a little bit through some of these questions, more of a season outlook type thing. So, Colin, I'm going to start with you on the first question here. Muth, get an extension done? Think it'll be done before the weekend's over?
Maybe not before the weekend's over, but it'll be done. And I'm thrilled with it. I'm cool with it. If you have a top 15 tight end, you keep him. I'm perfectly fine with that, 440, 442, 438 kind of range there. Ideally, it'd be like closer to 435, but whatever. I'm good for me.
I've been checking my phone to see if it happens while we're on here. I think it's that close. It's to the point where I'm asking Pat at practice, like, what his plans are. So, like, I kind of get a gauge for, like, all right, he's busy tonight. I can probably not worry about it tonight.
Yeah.
I think it'll be more than most people think, but maybe with some lower end guarantees. I kind of feel like that's the way they're headed. So, like, to me, like, what I would call like a pretty fair contract would be like 440 and half of it guaranteed. I think you may see more money, less guarantee.
Yeah. I was surprised actually he was not done before Cam.
They needed to do Cam to get him under the cap.
Okay.
Unless they wanted to restructure TJ or Minka.
Yeah.
Which they could do.
Don't do that.
Yeah. I guess we've kind of hammered some of this Cam idea thoughts. So I'm going to skip that one for now. how do you feel like the line's going to come together as the season goes along? So, Alan, you kind of touched a little bit on this earlier. What do you think about the line coming together as the season goes along?
I don't know. Get it healthy first, and then I'll tell you. If it looks like this all season, not very good. Like, if they get if Troy's healthy and he's in the lineup, and Samalu's healthy and he's in the lineup, and Frazier has 6-7 games under his belt, I might get me to a point where I feel okay about this line.
What's your thoughts, Colin?
Yeah, I mean, how quickly can Fautanu get back? How quickly can he be healthy? And how quickly will Tomlin wake up, right? If you ask me, if I was Tomlin, I'd say the second Fautanu's back, give him 1 week, and he's a starter. I think it's stupid to put off the process of getting this line gelled, especially because you don't have a quarterback under contract for next year. So in this specific sense, they're building the correct way. The line first, spending a ton of draft capital, extending their tight end, extending their running back. Please, God, extend Najee for the love of everything I've ever seen.
Absolutely zero chance that's happening. None whatsoever. They're not even.
That's terrible.
Not even.
That's talking. Seriously.
No, I mean,
so
that's been the case. That's been the case since the day they declined his option. I don't even think there's ever been 20 words spoken about it.
So they're just going to let him walk, you think?
Yeah.
Well, that's a conversation for another day. Yeah. Again, as soon as Fautanu is healthy and available,
I think they might extend Warren. They're in a pretty good place to do that. They can buy out.
That would be my final crash
out. Cheap years and maybe get like 3 of his FA years at a pretty steep discount for buying out the 2 cheap ones. I think that sounds like Omar Khan's kind of math to me.
I think the offensive line is going to be fine. I've been I throw this out there, and I think people think I'm insane, but I really think that this offensive line should be playing early and often this season, because I still think we're in a rebuilding year. Even though we're going to compete, and even though we have a chance to make a playoff, we have so many things that we've been doing. And you look at, we've overturned an offensive line over a couple of seasons. We have a completely different quarterback room. We have basically an entirely new wide receiver room. We have, almost a whole new cornerback room on defense. Linebackers, we've got 2 new linebackers in the mix. We've done so much that I feel like this is like a silent rebuild that we've kind of done here in Pittsburgh, where I don't know too many teams that change up the roster quite as drastically as we've had to do in the last couple of seasons. That's why I'm okay letting these guys struggle, honestly, is because it's going to build this team for the future. And either we find out if one of these 2 guys on the roster are the quarterback of the future, or you look elsewhere into the draft or free agency next year. So, I mean, I'm okay with them playing together, and I think it's going to help them in the long run. Personally, that's kind of how I'm looking at this year, is more of a long-term thing. And if we get to the playoff and we win, great. If not, we're set up better for the future as far as the offensive line is concerned.
Please don't do that. Please don't do that.
Don't do what?
Please do not win a damn playoff game. I mean, just please, like, I'm gonna be in the minority here, Alan. I know that you're an inside guy, but I'm gonna tell you right now, my agenda is 5-12 and Drew Aller. I don't care. 5-12 and Jackson
Dart is not good, so you should not want.
Oh my! Stop it! That's terrible dialogue. If you don't want him, give me Jackson Dart. Give me Jalen.
I don't want him either. There's 7 college quarterbacks better than both of those guys.
I already named my guy, Colin. You know my guy.
I don't know your guy, so
Is it Beck?
Colin is.
Oh,
no,
Beck
Cam Ward, buddy.
Cam Ward is very good.
On the Cam Ward train.
I'd take Cam Ward over those guys. Newsmeyer at LSU, for sure too. Put him in your film watching.
I just wait till Drew Aller's pop off, my friend.
The Steelers could not lose 5. They could not go 5-12 if they tried this season. There's just no chance of that happening. None whatsoever.
Alan's just bursting all my bubbles tonight, man. I'm glad we had him.
The Steelers, you could cut the entire Steelers offense, claim another offense entirely off waivers, and that team would not go 5-12 with this defense.
I mean, what do I have to do, man? I mean, I just
No, I
They're
just
not going to be that bad. They can't be that, and they can't. They have the best defense in the league, probably on paper. I think it's the best defense in the league.
that back half of the schedule, man. Great offense beats great defense. I'm telling you, that back half of the schedule, Alan, we are all in for a brutal awakening. I mean,
it's not going to be as bad as it looks. The Browns aren't that good.
It's not that team I'm worried about.
And you're going to lose to the Chiefs and the Eagles no matter where you put them in the schedule, so it doesn't really matter.
Understood. It's not the Browns I'm worried about. It's just the collective of all those teams going back.
And I think they're probably worse than the Bengals and better than the Ravens, not because they're better on paper, just because they own Lamar Jackson's soul. And he seems to like miss 2 out of every 3 games they play anyway. So, I think this team is destined for 7 to 10 wins. I have a hard time seeing them fall out of that range.
Yeah. So last little question I had here for the two of you before I let you go, because we're kind of pushing our time limit here. What we're trying to keep it to, Alan. Sorry. Mid-season trade for Sutton. I saw some rumors about that. Think that's on the table?
Yeah, more than him, like Devontae Adams, Darius Slayton, basically every wide receiver that their team should have traded and screwed up and kept. They'll be hard after those guys because of like why what are the Broncos doing with? I have many questions about what the Broncos are doing because Bo Nix is awful, but I wouldn't have taken him in the 3rd round. I saw him at the Senior Bowl and Penix too. And I was at the Senior Bowl and I watched Kenny Pickett at the Senior Bowl. And I was at the Senior Bowl and I watched Mac Jones at the Senior Bowl. Same exact setting. And I will tell you that neither of those guys was even like a quarter of good as Mac Jones and Kenny Pickett. Like I wouldn't want either of them to play at all under any circumstances this year. They're big projects and they're 24. I wouldn't want either of those guys under. I was totally do not draft on either of them. I think Denver might not win a game.
So you know what's funny is I said this and I got kind of tore up for this one, but everybody talked about Russell Wilson being the check down Charlie kind of guy because his yards per completion last year was down a little bit, and he would take his deep shots to kind of bring that average up. But he threw a lot of really, really close to the line of scrimmage balls. Bo Nix was way worse in college. I mean, everything he threw was at the line of scrimmage or behind the line of scrimmage. So
I don't know what anybody thinks Bo Nix does well. He's not accurate. He doesn't have a strong arm. He doesn't run well. I don't know I don't see the draw there at all.
So you're describing Kenny Pickett. Oh, flip! Add Jordan Love to that. Add my MVP pick to that.
I think Kenny Pickett is a significantly better quarterback than Bo Nix. Yes.
Pickett was the worst of the worst, dude. Like I swear, Alan, that was so bad, dude.
No, I mean Bo Nix does nothing. He's off.
I think Bo is a little bit of a sleeper. I saw that one lady on Good Morning Football, whatever the hell her name is, Jamie or something. She had Bo Nix as her sleeper. Man, Bo Nix is my sleeper too. I'm going to take the easy pick with Marvin Harrison Jr. as the offensive rookie. But other than the big 3 and yeah, obviously, and then Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels, other than those guys, Bo Nix might be my 4th candidate. And again, you got to remember Jordan Love could very easily win an MVP and a Super Bowl this year. And he was 24 and a half, almost 25 last year, his first starting season. I mean, that's,
Yeah, but he sat in the NFL for 3 years instead of in college. I mean, I think there's a difference there.
But I'm saying Bo Nix should not be playing this year because his skills are poor. They're going to be horrendous.
Sean Payton, though.
Horrendous. They may not. I'm telling you, they may not win a game. Whatever prop I could get for Denver to go 0-17, I guarantee that's good odds.
The
NFL
team's terrible.
Rookie of the year that nobody's talking about is Xavier Worthy, because the cops are eventually going to catch up to Rashee Rice, and Pat Mahomes is not going to stop throwing the football.
Right. Yeah,
I like it
to that too.
I like it.
I think it's interesting you mentioned Devontae Adams. That contract's a bit daunting. They'd have to rework that.
They'd have
before
to
he
figure
came.
something out with the money or send some bad money back the other way. But to me, I think that team, I mean, at least Bo Nix, like the Orange Crush people that have hope in their eyes. I mean, at least there's some reason to have some hope. He's new, he's exciting. Look at the Raiders. Like, they're not going anywhere, and they don't even have anybody young to get excited about. Like, they're just hopeless. I don't know what they're. Devontae Adams is the Bugatti parked in front of the trailer house meme. Like, that is 100% what they have right there. I don't know what, like, the contract is the only thing that
I agree.
if it wasn't for the contract, he probably already would have been traded. Darius Slayton too. The Giants aren't going anywhere. I don't know what they're. I mean,
he's a wide receiver 3/4 anyway.
Yeah, he's probably better than what the Steelers have, though.
Well, the Steelers have about 6 wide receiver 4s and a wide receiver 2. So
yeah, he would be a positive addition to the Steelers. I don't think he's particularly good, but I think he's better than what the Steelers have. Courtland Sutton is a good player. They should want him. Devontae Adams can be a very good player. They absolutely should want him. There's probably a couple more I'm not thinking of. Oh, Seattle. I mean, I think Seattle's a playoff team, but for whatever reason, things don't go well. I could see Tyler Lockett being on the market, absolutely. They got a younger player to fill that role in JSN, and I think they want him to eventually take it. So if that's a team that like gets off to a slow start for whatever reason, I could see Lockett being available too.
Yep. So I think it's about time to wrap this thing up. Ravens Chiefs, they've kicked off since we've started doing this thing. Who do you think's the winner of that?
I got the Chiefs, but I don't think I'm particularly confident in it.
Colin?
It's toss up. I'm gonna go, unfortunately, the Ratbirds of where.
I'm gonna take the Chiefs at home. So
might take the Ravens in the points. I think I'd take the Chiefs straight up. It's pretty close for me. Yep.
All right. Well, I'm gonna wrap this thing up. Alan, really, really appreciate you coming on today and sharing your insights and your wisdoms. Obviously, with you being in the facility, it brings a little bit of a different thing to our show because me and Colin just BS our opinions.
That's awesome. Yeah. Speculation's great. But...
knowledge.
So. Absolutely, guys. Well, happy to do it. It gets a little crazy for me in the season, so I'm glad we kind of got it taken care of now. And it's I can say I think you guys I like the knowledge. Like, I think there's a real passion, and it's backed up with information and not just nonsense. And I think that's it's a good start.
Yeah, I think we try to be fair and objective. Not trying to make this like a fanboy podcast. There's a lot of those that are out there, so we do try to bring a little facts to the table. So I'm going to tell you the same thing I told somebody when he was on. You open invitation anytime you want to join back in. We'll figure out a way to make it work with you. And I'll go ahead and give a Smitty ending for you. So, Alan, why don't you go ahead and tell the people where they can find you?
I do this every day, twice a day, so it should be okay. At @Saunders_PGH on X, Instagram, and TikTok. PGH Steelers Now. The site's account, SteelersNow.com, is where my words live. Read them so I can get paid. And we'll let all your audience in on the Alan 10 promo for SN Plus. You get 10% off an annual subscription. And that's about it, man. Like, give these guys a like because they deserve it. And you can find my podcast with Smitty at Steelers Now on YouTube or anywhere you find podcasts. Just search Steelers Afternoon Drive.
You still go with Chris Carter ever on the Tuesdays?
Yeah, mostly Tuesdays on
Locked On.
Steelers. But I think I can't remember. I think we did Mondays in season, or maybe we did Tuesday. Oh, we do the grades though. I think maybe it is Tuesdays in season. We do the grades. It's fun. There's laughter. Sometimes there's sadness, but it's a good time. Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming on. Anybody who's watching, hope you enjoyed this one. This one's a lot of fun for us. So like, share, subscribe. Alan, again, thank you. Colin, thank you. You took a little bit of a beating from the audience tonight, but we appreciate the fun anyway.
You know what?
Well,
If I have to be the odd man out, I'll do it. I don't care.
you did a great job. It was a good time. All right, guys.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks again, Alan. Trent, I'll see you later, buddy.